Beginning to be in play. I sometimes wonder, I think I probably should have done this years ago. But anyhow, that's okay. It's the reason for it happening now is because the time is now and the time is right. So that's what's happening. But for now, let's talk about where the FBAA is at on a couple of matters, what are happening with some things in the industry, and time permitting, if the gentlemen allow, I will take questions after. I'm sorry, I've got no screen here, so I'm going to do that. I've had this screen up before when I've spoken here in the past, but just as a reminder, industry associations are driven by purpose, and it's a fundamental pillar as to why they exist. And for the association, that purpose on advocacy, education, and support services. The first two are probably quite obviously the support services revolve around a day-to-day business that adds value to what you're doing from your backgrounds and your businesses in broking. And of course, it's always I always got to reflect this, it's the idiot factor. What am I doing? I've got a clicker here and I'm pointing at the screen. The computer's over here. So I once dropped an F-bomb when I was talking about that, just that I unfortunately didn't do it this time. But, I'll try and remember the point that needs to be is over there. A couple of enhanced initiatives. I've got their new initiatives, but they're enhanced initiatives that the FBAA board is doing now. And that is around people and culture. The FBAA has been in a very privileged position over the last, I think it's 4 years in a row. We've taken out our top Mortgage Employer of the Year awards through MPA. So that's a great honour. And now we're sort of expanding the scope of that. And we've got a new chairman, so it gets a new name, right? We've done it for a while. But the people and culture thing is very, very important to us to make sure that we're across what's happening with our staff and our people, and also what's happening in the marketplace as well that broadens out to that at the same time. Actually, I've gone one too far too quick. Let's forget that. We also have our Professional Standards Committee, which is a branch of what was our DRS, our Dispute Resolution Service. What we're looking at under professional standards, it's all well and good to say you're complying to the law. We all comply to the law, right? We don't take shortcuts. No, of course not. But you know, sometimes we tread a line and you sit back and go, well, does it really fit the pub test? Is it right within our professional standards? And I'm not pointing this at any one person in particular, because when I do that, you know, I was saying when you point your finger at someone, there's three more pointing straight back at you. So I'm the worst when it comes to swearing. But sometimes, you know, that gets into the media. The media these days treat language as a normal thing. So if you drop the F-bomb, for example, it's considered normal in media circles these days. Whether it's right in social media and to be putting it out there in a very blatant way, you know, work out, does it fit the pub test or not, or is it pulling back on the professional standards of an industry? So this is what this committee is now looking at to make sure that those things play out appropriately and well. And we have our Partnership Engagement Committee, which is a new term for something I set up in 2016 called our Concierge Program. That's where we engage with the lead aggregators in the country. And we've always spoken to them for, I guess, a cone of silence conversation. And that's only because what we don't want is me talking to the media or them talking to the media about what we've just been speaking about, because it's pretty confidential, it's strategic, it's understanding a marketplace, its pros and cons, its issues, and that also points straight back at the FBAA. But we're going to broaden the scope of that as they go forward this year under the guidance of Justin Delante, who's a broker out of, I think Devonport's the right way, the northern part of Tasmania, who sits on our board. And so that's all good stuff as well. So that's what's happening on a couple of new initiatives in the association. We talk about data. I want to have a quick conversation around some of the data and lead into a couple of conversations that we'll touch on as well. But we all know the saying, data is king, right? Yeah. The reality with data, at the end of the day, you become informed, but you become formed in a knowledgeable way. And if you become informed in a knowledgeable way from good data, that creates wisdom in what you're talking about. A classic example of that, if we go back to broker remuneration, where we're all at risk at one stage of losing our rem, government came out on a weekend and said, hey, we're no longer looking at broker remuneration. Nothing to see here, we're going to move on. And the opposition did the same, right? Their underlying comment was because the data shows. That was the FBAA data. Right? We didn't get the commentary on it, that's life, but at the end of the day, we made sure we had rigid data, and what I did, I spoke to, it was Jim Chalmers today in Shadow Treasury Portfolio, and I think it was Matthias that was sitting in government at the time. We presented the papers and said, here's our findings as an infographic. And I then said, but if you don't agree with the way we've cut the data, so that's what happens when you create your infographic, you cut the data, so pull out certain points. Here's the entire data set for you, the Treasury, whoever, to go through and have a look at. And that was about a month before they came out and turned around and said, nothing to see here. Data is king. The reality with data, though, you can manipulate data to say what you want it to say, not the right outcome. Don't play with it. Let it be truthful and honest and deal with the outcome. And that's what we did there. Fortunately, the outcome was very positive and we all moved on. So data's king. So some of the recent data from the FBAA is things like this. Around half the brokers facilitate on an annual basis $20 million of settlements each year. Right? So that gives you an idea of what's happening in the market from volume point of view. But more importantly is this one, 9 out of 10 loans get approved. That's a really, really important data set when you're talking to government and regulators. When you're talking about professional standards, professionalism in industry, outcomes and the beneficial outcomes that the consumers get, 9 out of 10 loans get approved. Now, settlements is another set of data, and whether do we have any banks here? Whether banks are pulling deals out at the last minute, going, hey, have I got a deal for you? I'm going to drop the rate. I'm going to put some money in your pocket just so you stay here. We all know that problem. It's settlement. The reality is industry is doing a great job. We know that your approval rates are high. We know that complaints are low. When you look at the AFCA data, we're still at a data set that's around 0.3% of all complaints held by AFCA, and they see an enormous amount of complaints. We know with ASIC in their past investigations around bid, they stopped. There was nothing to see here. We know, obviously, they're still going through bid now, and it's not finished yet. I've had conversations with one of the executive management team who is in the front of this particular audit that's happening at the moment under bid, so looking at your files, that at this stage, as best as I can get, because they're always very secretive until the data sets are out, there's nothing systemic to see. But remember what ASIC is, right? ASIC's a policeman. They're out to fine you because that's their job. They will find some issues and they will take those issues and put it to marketplace and rant and rave, and industry will need to tighten up here, here and here. That's going to happen. But it's not going to be systemic that turns around and says, I'm going to shoot you all in the head because you're dudders and cheaters. Right? That ain't going to happen either. But there is an exception in that, and it's around fraud, and we're seeing what's happening in that marketplace, and I'll come back to that in a sec. But these are very good supportive pieces of data to have when you're having those discussions and conversations at a regulatory piece. We know that we have a market size of around, well, what was in September, around 22,000 brokers. By now it should be around 22,600. They should reset that again in September this year. There's a lot of brokers in the marketplace, but it doesn't mean there's too many brokers. Right? You got to remember, your population's increasing. So you've got more people to service, so naturally there's going to be more brokers to help support a bigger population. It's a natural part of growth. So long as we're not carrying deadwood, if I can put it that way, and that's not new to industry brokers, but brokers have been in the industry for a couple of years who write one deal a year, is not what this is about. This is a full-time professional business. So if you're only doing one deal a year and you've been sitting in the game for 2 or 3 years, this is probably not the right spot to sit. And most likely either the lenders or your aggregator have already had something to talk to you about on that. We know the data on clawbacks and the pain that causes our industry, and I've been speaking about that for a very long time. Here is the bottom line, and you're not going to like this. For our colleagues, not our colleagues, some people in WA in our industry put a survey out to market. Right? They took those survey results and they managed to get it in the hands of Jim Chalmers, and about a month ago, Jim turned around and said, we're not looking at clawbacks. Right? You people have said you want clawbacks gone, completely forbidden, out, and all the rest of the rhetoric that followed that suit. That was never the conversation about clawbacks. It was about a fair outcome. That's what we had Stephen Jones positioned on. That's what we've got Daniel Molino, the current minister, positioned on. I only met with him a month ago. He then was lining up appointments with me with Treasury to speak to get this thing into the right process, which was probably going to run through the ACCC, to have a stakeholder review to get a fairer outcome until these... You're recording this, aren't you, Nissan? Where am I? This bit you take out. This bit you take. Some idiot put this survey out and turned around and just about squashed everything. Now, I've managed to use my relationship with Jim, with Treasury and the Federal Financial Services Minister to say, hey, that's not right, that isn't fair, that is not the industry view, we've already tabled the industry view, I want this still on the agenda. And so it is. Jim has said he will review it, or constantly have his team review it and look at it, and they'll come back to it another time. But that is a devastating outcome for many, many, many years of work. For somebody to stupidly step outside of what the right framework was to politically approach this to get a fair outcome and damage it. Because they went to the wrong end of the stick with the wrong thought process that was never going to happen, was never on a political agenda or a regulatory agenda or a lender's agenda. And so it was completely flawed, completely wrong. So I was pretty ticked about that. So I leaned into it heavy, made sure the conversation continues, and it will, but it will under somebody else's guidance, because I won't be around for it. Although I'm not leaving the industry, I will be somewhere, and you can bet your bottom dollar a part of that is lobbying, and I will make sure that conversation continues because I believe in the outcome. And of course, buckled into the clawbacks is the net of offset commissions, which again, spoken about before, 342% increase in brokers waiting 12 months to get paid after it's been used in an offset, if they get paid at all. Completely wrong and needs to be more aligned. The lenders can't do it because it becomes a breach of ACCC guidelines. They're moving in cartel behaviour as one. So the lender themselves can't do it. That's why it needs regulation to come in and create a more balanced program for how commissions are played on clawbacks. So it's difficult because it's a commercial arrangement, but the lenders will never move together on it. And of course, we know the data on mental health. I will, as always, because it's me, talk about mental health a little bit later, but one of the things that data sets do show is that people's mental health is improving. And that's because we've normalised the conversation and we've now provided actionable outcomes to help people with their mental health. And so people are surviving through those dark periods in a lot better manner than what they used to, which is a great, great outcome and what it was all designed to do. But we had to bring the awareness first. And I will continue that mantle in what I do next for my own private businesses to mental health within this industry. But it's a great outcome, and that's some great news as well. Let's talk about ASIC priorities for 2026. One thing that's not on that list, at the beginning there, I've reiterated deliberately the market size is important to understand, because the more we talk about certain things, the more focus it brings to a regulator to say, well, we're going to investigate this even further. The current bid reignition that started, it was advised to me it would start back in January last year. It was all because of our market check rate, right? And these are things we've got to be careful of. It's not that we shouldn't talk about it. We need to be careful how we talk about it and where we talk about it. Because what it does do is put targets on our backs if we're not careful. Because the bigger the market penetration we have as an industry, as good and as wonderful and as consumer-driven as it is for all the right reasons, the regulators look at that and say, well, that's a much bigger risk than what it was before. So that's why they're looking at bid again right now. And a part of that tags into, you start with market size, spoken about bid just then, you look at what's happening with AI and what's happening with privacy and record keeping and all those sort of things. One of the outcomes that's happening at the moment and why AI is largely under focus, one, because to make sure it's got the appropriate regulatory rigor around it, which it kind of doesn't just yet, it does in some respects but doesn't in others, is fraud. Fraud has jumped to a whole new level, right? And that's because of the complexities or the dynamics, I should say, of what AI brings to the table. So you go into a chat GPT or a Claude or whatever you use, I want a bank statement that looks like this, it can produce you the bank statement, right? There is technologies that have been built and are being further developed to be able to pick up something that's AI generated, but there needs to be more than that. So I can tell you now there is a significant escalation of fraud in our industry. A part of that, one of the new hats I'm wearing is to get involved in the investigation of some of that, to look at the data sets that come out of it, work through a plan to turn and says, well, how do we manage and deal with it? Knowing awful well, as soon as you deal with that, it will jump to another level again. It's a never-ending battle. But we need to learn from what's happening at the moment because it's significant. And it's not just to one sector, it's right across the entire industry in various degrees of depth, right? So we need to understand the entire market data place and its data set, what that specific entity's data sets look like, match and marry them across each other, pull out the relevant data to say, we may be seeing this major increase in fraud, and yes, brokers haven't done enough due diligence because this is new and we need to work out what that due diligence is to fight that particular level of fraud. But there's any accountants in the room? There's an accountant over here or a financial planner over there or another referrer over there. They are perpetrating the fraud and we're not being able to pick it up, so it gets through the system and we're getting blamed for it. Is that the problem? Don't know, so we've got to look at the data and got to pull it out. So we need to understand, is it genesis from a consumer, genesis from a referrer, is it genesis by us, right? And I can tell you now, if it's happening here from a broker, you will be shot in the head and you won't play the game. You'll be out. Metaphorically shot in the head, right? I don't carry a gun. You'll be out. Have no second doubt about it whatsoever, right? So a couple of things I'm doing with these new hacks is trying to protect this industry. Part of protecting the industry is getting rid of the bad eggs in the game, help support the innocent bystanders, and get rid of those who are external to us who are giving us shit deals, right, or shit information. We've got to work it that way, and there's ways we can do it, and those things are a part of an investigation that I'll be part of over the next 6 months. It will probably get into media news at some point in time. So you've heard it from me first. You keep it to yourself. Secret squirrel. We all remember what secret squirrels is. You break secret squirrel, I take your firstborn. I don't want your firstborn. I don't want my firstborn, so I don't want yours. No. But keep it to yourselves. But you'll see about it. So understand what's going on behind the scenes. It's all for the benefit in the future of the industry to make sure these things don't become so advanced so quickly. And AI is jumping on a steep U curve, a steep J curve of increased capabilities at the moment. Really steep. It's mind-boggling. We've got to grab this as best we can, deal with it internally within an industry, and learn from what's going on. Other scrutinies that are happening is around private credit. For those of you that use it, private credit has its place in the marketplace. It's there for a good reason. And yes, there's been some different practices in the past, just scraping for the right adjective for that. Look, they've tidied up their game. ASIC is really at this point in time, and we spoke late last year, well, I spoke late last year with them about this on a call, but they rang me on this, that their view is what they're trying to understand is how deep the issue is between somebody who's actually a consumer, the borrower, who's had their details altered so they fit the private credit parameters, which is commercial, basically commercial business lending, and they really shouldn't be there. Now, there are laws in this country under the NCCP that turn around and say, well, even if you've created that world, if it truly is consumer, then we can wind all that back and get rid of all that, and you're caught on a consumer law anyhow, and you're dead in the water because you've breached everything under the sun, even though you thought you could shortcut it through these other mechanisms through private credit. They can unwind that. They want to see how deep it is and understand, is it further than that? And a lot of them are very sensitive to it. There's more that are still working on it. There's some that have already been put into court and going through dramas that won't play out particularly well for them. But that's, again, a part of making sure that the professional standards of this industry are appropriately measured or appropriately actioned when there's something wrong. And we make sure that no one can look at us sidewards and say, yeah, bunch of dodgy Parramatta, Parramatta Road, used car salesman, I was going to say. No, that's a very old saying. But no one can point the finger at us, yeah? That's all here to protect the industry. The other thing that's on ASIC's list of priorities is the compensation scheme of last resort, the levy blowouts. They had a government budget, if I can put it that way, of about 20 mil. They're up into the billions. This is why they're looking at the levies, passing it back to different industries. We've pushed back on this probably 4 months ago when this first, or longer, when this first started, to saying, wait a second, not us. This is financial planning. Your problem is actually out of Melbourne with a couple of groups down there. I suggest you lean into them, don't lean into us. Right? They already have to a degree, but it's a small degree considering the depth of the problem they've got. one of the things they need to do, and we've put this in a submission to both the scheme and also the government into Treasury, saying that they actually need to deepen the purse. Government needs to move past the 20 mil that they gave them to play with for these compensation schemes, and it probably at least needs to be $1 billion. It potentially needs to be twice that. Not that government is very keen to do anything like that, but what we've seen and what's happened in that AFSL financial planning space is significant, and it ain't over yet. But we shouldn't wear the bill for it. That's the bottom line. Somebody else's problem. So we position that. We are constantly having, we're having quarterly catch-ups with the compensation scheme CEO, with David there, together with AFCA and together with ASIC on a quarterly or 6 monthly basis to make sure we keep across all these things that's on a proactive basis rather than other things that happen more regularly on a reactive pace. All right. That's what's happening with ASIC. Couple of things we did to help communicate some of these issues to us. We've already released one. There's 3 more about to be released on our new podcast series called Unscripted. Even though it's with me and Joe, it's with Joe and someone else. But again, we'll be having pretty raw conversations about a lot of the issues that are happening, as well as some of the reforms that we're doing. And you'll see through the regs group within the FBAA, the Regulatory Engagement Group, we're going to be putting out shortly a series of what we call 101 compliance, 101 best practice compliance, where we're using David Carson, who works with us now on a permanent basis. He's the guy that's from ASIC, wrote RG 209, Responsible Lending Obligation, was enforcement in ASIC, a qualified lawyer, doesn't like the culture of ASIC, which is why he went private many moons ago. He's been ghostwriting me for about 10 years with our papers to government. Really smart man, knows what's going on. But what we've done is we're taking the core issues that we find within the broking sector as direct feedback from yourselves or from our members within our broker focus groups, other areas that we see regular questioning and querying because people don't understand what's being spoken about, is taking pieces of regulation as they've been written and saying, hey, in a plain English version, this is what it means. We're not giving you legal advice, right? We're trying to put it in a conversation or in context in a simple manner so you can understand it and not go, I've got no idea what the hell they're talking about, right? And then trip over it inadvertently. So they're should be starting coming out from hopefully no later than May, if not through April. But there's a series of those that will go on and on and on for life as we find more and more to try and make these things more easily understood. And it'll wind up in unscripted as well as it goes forward. Almost done. Wellness Hub, mental health. You know what it's about. We started the awareness advocacy back in 2016. As I said earlier, we've normalised that conversation. The data is showing a reduction in problems people are having with mental health. It's not over with and will never be over with. But we're on the right path. This was a mechanism to bring practical solutions. So the Wellness Hub is open to anyone in the world, basically. When you engage the professional services that sit behind that, you pay for their services, right? That's fair. But the access to the information is free. And a part of this is dealing with problems when they are really dark problems that you can't resolve yourself. But before you get there, you need to do something like this. You need to find your peace, right? I'm taking the Harley that's out front. There was a very nice looking Mercedes beside it. There's a Ferrari over the other side. I'm picking the Harley, and I don't care if he doesn't like that. No, that's okay. Find your peace. This is my peace, right? I like to ride. I like to go on distances. I implore all of you, before you need to engage professional services, if you're feeling like depression or anxieties are getting on top of you, dig into what is your peace. Is it motorbike riding, surfing, gardening, walking, running? It doesn't matter what it is, playing golf, tennis. It's irrelevant what it is. So long as you find peace within your heart and your soul as to what you're doing, that will help break the cycle before things go too far. If they go too far, then you need professional assistance, and don't be ashamed of it. I've spoken before. I sorted it out myself when I fell into a depression a few years ago and had no idea how I was going to deal with it. Wound up hearing a speech through a psychotherapist out here at Sydney, and I went and engaged her, and it was the best thing I ever did. Don't be ashamed or afraid of doing that. You will be such a better person for it if that's what you need. But beforehand, Find your peace. There's nothing more important than that. And with that, never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed individuals can change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. Don't think you've got to be a big conglomerate to change something. As an individual, I changed the conversation on mental health back from 2016, just kept at it. And then we all got involved, right? We're a small group of committed people and we changed the world. It's a brilliant thing. And with that, that's me. And thank you for putting up with my